Happy Monday, everyone. It's Greg Dixon here with Betty Withrow with Total Traffic and Conversion. And today we're going to talk about editing types and phases of editing for your manuscript. And I'm gonna start with a little story. Back in the 90s, back in the last millennium, I put together a paper to submit to speak at a conference. And I didn't have a whole lot of time, and I had no budget for editing. So what I did is I printed out my article, and I was playing in a band, and afterwards we went for coffee or pizza or something. So I gave everybody a copy. So they read through they gave them each a pen, and they read through the article and marked it up with their comments. So the interesting thing is, I think I got 4 back, and it became really evident that almost everybody looked at something different. One person looked at the content, just purely, the content. They didn't look at any grammar or typos or anything else. Somebody else who was kind of a knee-jerk reaction to grammar, and things, and then everybody had something completely different. And there were definitely problems in the manuscript, but not one person identified anything. Nothing was ever identified by more than one person. So that was interesting. So the moral of the story is, one is it's almost impossible to edit stuff yourself, and that each type, there's a different approach to editing in different phases, and we're going to talk about some of those. Betty has much more experience on the other side of it as a writing coach and editor and ghostwriter. So she's been through this much more. So you mentioned before we started here that there's one phase that you're particularly good at, and that it starts the whole process, and that's developmental editing.
Right.
So do you want to elaborate on that?
Sure. Yeah. That's developmental editing is kind of it's the next stage after coaching, and sometimes it's taking place during coaching. So what it is, developmental editing is when I read what you have written and look into it and start asking questions. What would make this character, say it's a novel, for instance, what would make this character more relatable? How can we deepen this or that part of the character? How can we develop this plot more effectively? What did you mean when you said that? Because sometimes you write something that makes perfect sense to you, and the next person reads it and says, what? So that's what developmental editing is all about, is opening up the concept and communicating more effectively with your reader. And it's inevitable that you're going to have blind spots where, as I said, something seems perfectly clear to you, and then someone else reads it and they don't have the backstory and the context that you had when you wrote it. So in order to make it more clear, you can put in some of that context, or possibly expand horizontally, I guess, in how you would explain that concept or that piece of character or whatever it is. So it starts back in the part where you're doing the arc of your manuscript. What is it that you want to convey? Who's your audience? Where are you going with it? And the developmental editing is all designed to create a unity in that flow. And as a lover of language, that's really my favorite part, is getting into it with the author and making that language really smooth, because the goal here is to have it so that when your reader reads what you have written, it flows straight into their mind with no hang-ups, as in, what did she mean by that? Why did she say it that way? Or any of that type of stuff. And, as I said, during coaching, that's one of the things that I do. And it's not editing as such, but it's more, making it really solid, making it so that it makes sense and it kind of hangs together and rings true, if you like. That's the first stage of editing. And because I'm also a grammar nerd, I know that a lot of times the way that your grammar supports your meaning is extremely important. And there's a great quote that I love that meaning meaning is flecks that float on the gossamer of style. So you want your style to be consistent and your grammar to be consistent with the tone that you want to convey. That's the kind of stuff that developmental editing is all about.
Oh, that's great. And that's the fun part for you, right?
Yeah, that's the fun part.
That's the fun part. So what's next in the step here?
What's next is to really get back to the nuts and bolts of the grammar and make sure that everything is tight, and be sure that the voice is consistent, that kind of stuff. And then we get into the jungle, sort of, so to speak, of copy editing. And that's much more involved with stuff like punctuation, deeper grammar issues, and paragraph flow, that kind of stuff. It's much more technical, and I'm okay at it. Actually, here's the thing about editing, Greg, is that it's a good idea to think about having more than one editor, or at least more than one person review, because it's so easy to miss things. Like you pointed out, you got 4 people looking at something, not one of them, 4 people, not one of them is seeing the same thing as the other 3. So, for instance, if I've coached a person through the book, I will gladly be their first editor, and I really encourage them to have other people look at it, look at what the copy issues are, and possibly hire a line editor that goes through it and makes sure everything is the way that it's supposed to be. And having said that, if all I'm doing is a copy edit, then that's a simple thing, because I'm not having to rethink the whole process I went through in the developmental editing. And once again, there's blind spots that develop in the creative process. It's just inevitable. So with copy editing, it's really, is the spacing right? Are things spelled correctly? That kind of stuff. That's copy. And as distinguished from writing copy, which is a whole different thing. So we use the same word for completely different functions. Welcome to English.
Well, welcome to English. Somebody said this, says, I don't know, do they have no imagination? They use 4 different uses for the write or the word read or whatever.
Yeah. Yes. Read, read. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, not even consistent.
Yeah.
Now that we're not even going to get into Irish, but that's something else. But
yeah, see, that's the point about grammar too, though. See, grammar is supporting a whole subcontext that's never spoken about, cultural assumptions, about the methods that people use to communicate with one another, and that's how words literally create your universe. Yeah, mentally and neurologically as well.
I just want to make a comment here. You said that often you might want to have more than one person do the editing, and I think in a larger, like a publishing company, you will have specialists, like the one person who does the copy editing, somebody else who does the developmental, and then line editing and proofreading. So it's likely to go through 4 different people.
Yes, and it really should. Here's an example. Okay, a friend of mine wrote a science fiction novel. He asked me to be a beta reader for him and go through and make suggestions of where could things be improved. Find me I forget, I think it was 3 things that aren't solid yet that could be more solid. So after I read through it a few times, I said, okay, here's what I'm seeing, and gave him a review of things that he could use to go back into his own process. And it wasn't really developmental editing, but it was beta reading. Okay, then he goes back to his other editor and has her kind of tighten it up. And I just today got an email from him asking me for and I told him it needs a proofreader. And so I gave him a referral to a proofreader I know who has stellar references, and God bless her, because I tell you, that's not what I do. I mean, there, as you say, there's specialists. There's specialists for most things, like for punctuation issues and things like that. If you are really an expert in Word, you don't have a lot of stuff cropping up that you may have if that's not really what you do, you
Yeah.
know? And so, yeah, it needs to go through a number of people before it's ready for print.
Okay. So what's the next step down here? We did copy,
Hmm.
editing.
Uh-huh.
What would you think is the next line down?
Let's see. We have the
Line
copy.
editing?
Line editing, yeah, line editing, right? It's kind of the same. I mean, back in the day when you said edit, it kind of meant everything, and then more recently, it's been broken down into these specialized fields. So in line editing, that's line by line. What's wrong with this word? What's wrong with this letter? What's wrong with this quote mark? What's wrong with this, thing? And so it's verging into proofreading, but proofreading is actually um, that's the last moment of line editing. So again, they blend into one another. Line editing could be considered proofreading, but if you have someone like the lady that I was recommending who that's what she does, don't ask her to line edit because she's not looking for what's wrong with the this well, yeah, I guess she does probably the spelling too, but there's definitely little niches of ways. And if you're contacting an editor, ask questions about what they do, what do they do best. If they don't like to do something, ask them if they know somebody who does, and that way you can have a much nicer relationship with people who are on your team than if you're asking them to do stuff that they don't particularly know how to do and they have to learn
Yeah.
it along the way, and they're probably not going to be at anywhere near as good as the people who already have that knowledge and specialize in it.
Yeah, for sure. And
Mhm.
that comes to a point is it's really good to know who the editor is because
Mhm.
one editor may be good for, one person, but would
Mhm.
absolutely destroy somebody's manuscript in another case, right? If they want
Right,
to,
right.
if they want to impose a different vision on the author
Mhm.
and force them into something that wasn't good. It's like,
Right.
yeah, like you don't want to take Mark Twain and and make him sound like the Queen's English, right?
Yes. Yeah, very really good point, Greg.
Yeah,
If you have a certain voice in the manuscript, you want to keep that voice. Yeah, don't put it in the Queen's English. If you have a lot of slang or ethnic materials of different kinds, specialized environment that speaks in a certain way, that's part of the book. Don't mess with it. And maybe it may grate the editor's nerves because it's not the Queen's English or American Standard English or any of that, but it's the voice of the author.
yeah.
So leave it.
So that's very important.
Hmm.
And y- so actually the one phase of editing that probably most people think of when they're, is the proofreading,
Hmm.
right? Because they don't really those other stages of editing it probably doesn't cross their mind that they need it, when you're just starting out.
Yeah, I think that's true, but I also think that when people have gained a little bit of experience in writing, they'll realize that they need some support on those different levels.
Yeah,
I had an excellent novel come to me recently, and the woman knows that she needs support in developing the characters, and it's very exciting because her writing is terrific, and it needs support for her as an author, but also to make the characters stand out more, make the action more compelling, all of those things. Um, and the more experience you have as a writer, the more you realize that going it alone is just not good. You need other people involved in your process.
as, yeah, a recipe for chaos.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
And a recipe for loneliness too, because what I've noticed is that women who are writing these novels, I've had several of them come recently that they may have some pretty disturbing material in there, and it may relate to their own life or their own experience, and usually does. That's why they're writing about it. And so having the personal support of someone who's ready to listen without asking too many questions, but if they have something they want to share, then being ready to support them in that's really important. And it will make a much better book in the long run.
Yeah, for sure. So you so your advice, well, the first advice is you need editors and probably more than one,
Hmm.
and find a good team of editors for your particular story and book, what you're doing.
Right.
And
Yeah.
and you I suspect that you would recommend yourself for developmental writing editor if that's what that's what you need.
I would, and I also know some other people who are very good at it in case I don't have time to take on a project.
Yeah.
But yes, get somebody who reads it with you. Get beta readers, even if you don't want to hire an editor. Get people who will get involved with you and say, you really should talk more about this, or what
Yeah.
about that, and make suggestions. Tell you where you're strong. Tell you where you're weak, which is even more important, and let you know how it made them feel when they read the book. What thoughts do they have about how it could be improved and things like that? Get
Yeah.
help with it.
Yeah, and I think sometimes, not just writing, but sometimes when people are designing a course or they're putting together something that they want to talk about,
Hmm.
or even their company, sometimes what they think they're doing and what resonates with people are not the same. Like that, like that's where I think with your beta reader, somebody could say, "Oh, and chapter 5, you mentioned this. I think that's actually your key story here.
Yeah.
Maybe, yeah." Yeah, maybe we can go
Right.
back and expand that.
Very true. Very
Yeah,
true. Because sometimes what you think is the point of your book is not what other people think. And in the long run, it may be that in your own life, it's not doing what you thought it was going to do. It may take you in a whole different direction that you didn't even know about, or it may take you years to even realize this is the real reason I wrote this book. I mean, I had that happen to me the other day, where it was a book that I wrote, I think 7 years ago. I knew why I wrote it at the time. I had a perfectly valid and good why. And then as I got deeper in the work that I'm doing now, and I look back into the work that I'm doing with other authors, I see that there's other reasons that I wrote the book that are deeper reasons. So, I mean, and this is one of the reasons that you write, not only to reach other people, but also to grow and to reach deeper into your own soul material and learn more about what you're doing.
for sure. It's a good way of exploring yourself and
Hmm.
kind of therapy in a
Yeah,
way. It
yeah,
can be.
exactly.
So
Yeah,
I think the other day we were talking about we just urge people to go out and write. Says even if you don't plan to publish it, just write it.
right.
It's good rewarding in itself.
That's right. That's right. There's nothing that is going to bring you the kind of awareness of what you are and what you have in your life that writing will do. I forget who said it, that the unexamined life is not worth living. Well, if you when you write, you're examining life. It may be your own life. It may be a reflection of your life that's coming through your writing. You're examining life and gaining the insights that can only be gained through reflection.
Yeah.
So I'm sticking with that.
You're sticking with that.
Yeah,
that's,
yeah.
that's a good thing.
I've seen it in action. I've seen people really, truly change and transform their whole vision of who they can be and what they can do with their lives. And writing is the catalyst for that.
And writing is the catalyst.
Mhm.
I think sometimes what happens is people, yeah, you'll ask them, says, "Well, what's your life been like? What have you done? What's interesting?" And a
Mhm.
lot of people say, "Oh, I haven't done anything interesting, right?"
Right.
And then you start writing, it's holy smokes, that was some adventure,
Right.
right?
Yeah. Like, what about the time when you ran away and joined the circus? Oh, that was boring, right? Yeah. It's true. I mean, everybody has a story. Everybody has a wisdom that no one else has. I mean, we're unique beings here. So
Yeah,
even the person who sat next to you in school who had the exact same teacher, was looking at the same chalkboard, maybe put the same answers on the same test, did not have the same experience that you did.
yeah. I have that experience with my brothers and sister with their parents. Not one of
Mhm.
us has the same impression of the parents.
Yeah.
We were kind of across different times
Mhm.
phases too, but so we're trading notes, right? But there are a few things that that we'll never agree on, right? I will interpret it one way and somebody will interpret it somewhere else. And
Right,
yeah,
right. Yeah, yeah.
yeah. Makes it part of the adventure.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's what makes us unique, is those different points of view. And finding ways to express those different points of view can be enlightening to one another. I mean, I'm having a lot of talks with my own sister right now, one of my sisters who's in a major life transition. And it's very apparent, like you said, that the same information interpreted in very different ways.
Yeah, yeah,
you know, yeah, it's
yeah.
okay. It's supposed to be that way.
It's supposed to be that way. Yeah, that's part of the adventure.
Yeah.
If we knew everything and it was all stable and we're all the same, it'd be boring.
Oh, it'd be awful. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, we're not doing that.
Okay, so we got to the proofreading, and then I guess we should. You had mentioned a few other steps that we're not going to get into, but just what could happen next with your
Right.
your
Right.
book.
Right. Well, yeah, I'll just kind of run them through what they might be. After everything is proofed and it's looking good, then you want to run it through a book design process. Have somebody who's really good and expert, preferably at formatting, somebody with tons of experience, and is a book designer, and have them lay out your book in such a way that it's absolutely beautiful. And hopefully that same person is also a book cover designer, so that the flow of what's on the cover, when they open the book, everything makes sense and it all just literally flows. And then you get into other things like the printing process, the publishing process, or what type of publishing you're going to do, and so on. And definitely, we're not talking about that today.
Yeah,
Too much.
we talked about that in a previous episode a little bit.
Yes, a little bit. Yeah.
Publishing options, and then even we talked about an agent,
Yeah.
why you might need one. So
Why you might need one, why you might not need one, all of those. Yeah.
yeah, all those things. Yeah, so that's great. I hope everybody got some ideas out of this, and
Yeah.
and uh, and just and there are resources. So you mentioned we know so a few people are really good at cover design and book design, which is kind of an art in itself.
It is.
Yeah, Olivia Hammerman is listed on her site, and she's
Hmm.
does really good work. And there are others that know and you've worked with.
Hmm.
So yeah. So anyway, come visit us at Total Traffic and Conversion. Sign up for our newsletter, and we might even send you advance notice on our broadcast. That's on our list of things that we should be doing. We're not always good at. So
Let's just say it, Greg. We're having growing pains here. There's a lot going on, and it's like, oh, okay, that's the to-do list. We can refer to that,
yeah, we can refer to it. I've been following um Esther Hicks or Abraham Hicks, and basically she said most of you have enough stuff in on your to-do list to take up about 20 lifetimes. So we shouldn't fret too much if we don't get everything done.
Yeah, amen. I'm with that. I'm with that. I'm saying, the call is there. Answer the call. It's for you.
Yeah, yeah, and things that were maybe on the list, other things come up that are important that we
Yeah.
have to deal with, and we didn't really expect. So but they're here.
Right.
Yeah,
Right. Right.
yeah.
Yeah.
So
Leave room. I think that's the motto. It's like what we were
leave
talking about in
room.
the broadcast. Leave room for the unknown unknowns, because they're there and they're going to show up.
Can you say that whole quote?
Which one is it? The one about the 70%?
No, the one about there are known knowns and unknown
Oh,
knowns.
yeah, yeah. Well, that's what it is. There are known knowns, and then there are the unknown unknowns. And so, one of my sons is career military. In officer school, they teach you to plan for 70%, leave 30% wide open for those unknown unknowns. Because if you have it all planned out to the last detail, you have no flexibility for when the unknown unknowns show up. So know that they're there And then when they do show up, you've got room to handle them.
Yeah,
Does
just
that make sense?
expect that they might show up and not be totally taken off guard.
Yes,
And
exactly.
and those can often be opportunities.
Yes,
Some
exactly.
creative something. Your book might take a different direction because of something,
Mm-hmm.
and life might take a different direction.
It often does.
It
Yeah.
often does. Okay, well, I guess that's good for today, and thanks everybody for joining us. And we'll see you, and I'll play our little cute little video at the end because it's
Yay!
yay.
Thank you, Al.